Viewer discretion is advised.
Construction has officially begun on new Highmark Stadium in Orchard Park and is expected to open on time in 2026. After some preliminary renderings were released, we got an update from the team in February, which shows some close-ups of the exterior and an end zone view of the interior. I love how they kept the stadium outdoors as to not lose the advantage of having to play football near Lake Erie in the dead of winter, and allegedly these red lights are heaters, not just LEDs. The new stadium will hold 65,000 spectators, have multiple video boards, a canopy that covers 65% of the seats, statues of buffaloes, and a freezer where they keep Damar Hamlin's body while his robot replacement continues to roam the planet. This stadium is on the way out, and for years, despite its charm and amazing atmosphere, has had bottom-tier facilities for the NFL. And as they transition to new Bills Stadium, they've put some work into Highmark, but understandably, not much.
So there's actually going to be a major issue because they're building it right across the street. They're going to be demoing the old, like what Highmark Stadium is for parking. But the issue is that when that new stadium is built, they're still going to be demoing the old one, so you're not going to be able to park there. So for a while, there's going to be a significant lack of parking.
War Memorial Stadium, Buffalo, New York. Known colloquially as the Rock Pile, War Memorial Stadium in Buffalo served as the early, oddly configured home of the Bills for 8 AFL seasons and then 4 NFL campaigns in the Super Bowl era. This was an oddly configured multi-use stadium that was cold and uninviting. Combine that with Buffalo winters and you probably enjoyed getting frozen to your seat, but at least you got to see O.J. Simpson slice up a few defenses here. War Memorial was replaced in 1972 by Rich Stadium and demolished in 1989. For 19 Billy Buffalo. You're looking at the less creepy version of Billy Buffalo, who was redesigned in 2018 to get him off of a few sex offender lists. He looks like a Care Bear fucked a Teletubby, and now little Billy is here. Not surprised they went with the whole Buffalo Bill thing since the whole team has that going on. But I will say this, the guy in the suit is probably the warmest guy on game day. Buffalo Bills, in between Jim Kelly and Josh Allen, the Bills were a quarterback wasteland, about as exciting as the town in winter. JP Looseman, Alex Van Pelt, Drew Bledsoe, and Trent Edwards were all big reasons Buffalo spent 17 years dodging the playoffs. But you have to go back to their early days to find the worst of the worst. That dubious honor goes to Dennis Shaw, who went 8-27-2 in upstate New York, completing just 53% of his passes and throwing 32 more picks than touchdowns. Buffalo Bills, Jake Arians. Jake Arians lasted just 10 games in the NFL, and that's probably because he only converted 57% of his kicks in 2001 for the Bills. You might be wondering why Scott Norwood isn't the pick, but Norwood was actually a solid option before missing a tough kick on grass in Super Bowl 25. Thank God. East. Let's just do all 3 of these teams right away. The Miami Dolphins, New York Jets, and Buffalo Bills all hate Tom Brady. Yes, there are specific players that might bother each team, like say Kevin Dyson for the Bills, but no player on earth demands the collective ire of 3 fan bases the way that Tom Terrific does. Brady was a stunning 90-22 against all 3 combined, 31-8 versus the Jets, and a staggering 33-3 versus the Bills. Yes, the Dolphins beat him 12 times to 24 losses. That's like being the least ugly at an ugly contest. I think I speak for all 3 of these teams when I say, fuck you, Tom Brady. Below Bills. It's not Scott Norwood. Bills fans, most of them, forgave him after Wide Right. Also, they had much bigger fish to fry a few years later when O.J. Simpson proved that murder was legal in the state of California. Buffalo Bills, Terry Pegula. Look, Terry Pegula is not a bad owner in terms of the on-field product. However, he has leveraged pretty hard against the city of Buffalo and the state of New York to get what he wants, like close to $1 billion in public funding for the new Bills Stadium. Pegula isn't poor. He bought the team for $1.4 billion in cash. It's also unclear if he knows he owns the Sabres, a team that has so sucked since he bought him. Buffalo Bills, Kelvin Benjamin was a guy who had all the measurables. He was a 6'5" big body wide receiver and a matchup nightmare. Unfortunately, one measurable he excelled in was calories. After 3 decent seasons, the Bills acquired Benjamin in 2017 for a 3rd and a 7th, who became Rashawn Golden and Andre Smith. Not great players, but the Bills got next to nothing for Benjamin, who we're not even sure likes football. He was cut after 1 season in Buffalo, then was famously cut by the Giants for stealing pizza. Super Bowl 25, Giants versus Bills, 1991. Unfortunately for Bills fans, this game ended with part 1 of Wide Right. But the story of Super Bowl 25 is much deeper than just one kick. The Bills had been a juggernaut all season, and when the Giants took out a 49ers team that started the season 13-1 to even get here, it looked like the Bills would finally end their Super Bowl drought against a seemingly undermanned team. And for the majority of the game, they looked right. The Bills jumped out to a 9-point lead when Bruce Smith tackled Jeff Hostetler in the end zone, forcing a safety and expanding their lead to 12-3. In this grueling, old-school game of football, both the Bills and Giants had to earn their points in the toughest ways possible, as the G-men employed a disruptive defensive strategy to throw the Bills' run-and-shoot offense off course. With 25 seconds left to go in the half, the Bills' 9-point lead was gone. This is one of 3 blown leads on this list, where the offending team would also later lead in the game, as the Bills went up 19-17 following a Thurman Thomas TD with 14:52 left. Matt Barr kicked a field goal 7 minutes later, setting up one of the most iconic missed kicks in Buffalo Bills history. Well, besides one other one. Buffalo Bills, Terry Bledsoe. You ever think that you could just be a GM? Longtime sports writer Terry Bledsoe did, and oh boy, it did not go well. After a full career as a journalist, he became an assistant GM for the Giants, then landed the GM job for the Bills. The team suffered back-to-back 2-14 seasons in 1984 and 1985. You could argue that the losing seasons paved the way for Bill Polian to turn around the team by drafting Jim Kelly and a slew of other stars, but a 4-28 record is a pretty sad story for Terry. The Buffalo Bills. Remember those 2 TV hosts who were having an affair? I don't, and I don't even care. However, something similar happened to the Bills organization in 2023. The team fired 2 execs who were reportedly involved in a romantic relationship in which they got too brazen during the team's London trip. COO John Roth and Senior VP/General Counsel Catherine D'Angelo were both fired for getting their tea and crumpets from sources other than their spouses. That actually wasn't the reason they were terminated. It was that she was a direct report of Ross and subject to many performance reviews. Levy. When you think of losing Super Bowls, no one else comes to mind but Marv Levy and the Buffalo Bills. The star-studded team of the early 90s went to 4 straight Super Bowls. Going back to the start of Levy, his first head coaching position came with the Montreal Alouettes in the Canadian Football League, where he won 2 Grey Cup titles. I bet you didn't know that, unless you're one of those Canadian nerds. He then went on to the Kansas City Chiefs before finding Buffalo. Between 1990 and 1993, the Bills went to all 4 Super Bowls, coming up short every single time. His best chance was against the Giants in 1990, but then he faced some OP teams after that. He ended his career with 11 playoff victories and 4 Super Bowl appearances, which are both the most for coaches to not win the big game. And while Marv Levy is in the Pro Football and Canadian Football Hall of Fames, he didn't win a Super Bowl. And if you're a Bills fan and you made it this far, why do you torture yourself like that? Highmark Stadium has been in use since 1973, making it the 4th oldest stadium in the NFL. However, construction on new Highmark Stadium has already begun, with it set to open in 2026. The 53-year lifespan for Highmark is one of the longest stadium tenures in NFL history. Buffalo Bills, 1994. It's hard to point to what would be the high point of 5 other NFL teams, but the Bills' rock bottom moment came after their 4th consecutive Super Bowl loss, falling 30-13 to the Dallas Cowboys in 1994. Buffalo's resilience to reach 4 straight Super Bowls was overshadowed by their inability to win one. The defeat cemented their legacy as a team that couldn't deliver on the biggest stage. Yes, there are dark moments after this, like drafting and playing J.P. Losman
a guy who fancied playing music versus actually playing football.
Buffalo Bills. Look, we all know the Bills lost 4 straight Super Bowls, but in hindsight, losing to the Giants in number 25 probably hurts the most, considering they were blown out in the other 3 appearances. I mean, Scott Norwood had a chip shot, and he blew it. That's gotta linger with you like a fart in an elevator.
Buffalo Bills 2005. After a half-decade removed from the playoffs, the Bills hit a low point in 2005 with an abysmal 5-11 record. The season saw a quarterback carousel with J.P. Luzman and Kelly Holcomb, and a struggling offense that was harder to watch than EA, ruining the Madden franchise. The defense, once a strength, started to fall apart, and head coach Mike Mularkey's decision-making came into question as the season wore on. I mean, they hired Mike Mularkey, so what do you expect? It would take them 11 more years to reach the playoffs as alcohol sales became the #1 revenue source in Buffalo.
Buffalo Bills, 2018, Tremaine Edmonds. Edmonds put up a lot of stats, but he wasn't quite as good as his stats would indicate, as Bills fans will tell you. He's also on a new team now, so that pick was mid. 2018, Josh Allen. He's become one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and is on track to potentially be a Hall of Famer. Hit. 2019, Ed Oliver. Oliver, who looks like Paul George on creatine, has been solid but never spectacular. He's one of those guys that just kind of hangs around without ever making much of a splash. I'd say he's been mid. 2021, Gregory Rousseau. Rousseau hasn't even come close to reaching his potential. I think in very short order he will be one of the better defensive linemen in the league, so therefore he's a hit. 2022, Kaiir Elam. Elam's rookie season was unspectacular at best. Still has a lot of potential but a lot to prove. So far, mid. Buffalo Bills, 1990, Jim Kelly. I know that newer Bills fans are probably pissing and shitting their pants that a Josh Allen season isn't on here, but I went with Kelly because the Bills were honestly the best team in football in 1990, even if they didn't bring home the Lombardi. Kelly led the league with a 101.2 passer rating and had a stellar regular season, and he kept up his stellar performance in the playoffs. Although his Super Bowl was a little bit uneven, he put the Bills in perfect position to capture the Lombardi. Unfortunately, his kicker was Scott Norwood instead of Adam Vinatieri, and the Bills lost by 1 point in what would be the first of 4 straight Super Bowl losses, and by far their greatest chance at taking home a Super Bowl. Buffalo Bills. I said in last year's roast of the Bills that Josh Allen was the Vegeta to Patrick Mahomes' Goku, but that was too nice. The gap between Goku and Vegeta is nowhere near as wide as the gap between Mahomes and Allen. If anything, Allen is Yamcha, Joe Burrow is Vegeta, and Mahomes is Goku. Yes, Allen beat the odds to become a good NFL quarterback despite being terrible in college, and guess what? Your team has dick to show for it. Literally, the Josh Allen era has produced more on-field dildo incidents than AFC Championship game appearances. Meanwhile, as Mahomes continues to climb up the GOAT ladder, what will Allen's legacy ultimately be? A talented also-ran whose best moment was in a playoff game that he lost? Better yet, what will the legacy of the Allen Bills be overall? Bitching and moaning so hard to change the overtime rules after 2021, even though the very next week, the Bengals got a defensive stop that you couldn't in overtime against the exact same team in the exact same venue to go to the Super Bowl? I am truly and honestly happy that Damar Hamlin is alive and well, and his story is unbelievable. But all of the great PR that he provides for your table-smashing alcoholic fan base doesn't change the fact that he's not a very good player, or the fact that you lost 4 straight Super Bowls and that O.J. Simpson is arguably the best player your team's ever had. Buffalo Bills. Bills. You know what bills are? Bills are something that you have to pay in order to live in a home. And there are a lot of people who are not rich enough or wealthy enough to pay their bills. So therefore, the Buffalo Bills team name is indirectly offensive to homeless people and poor people, and I will not stand for Buffalo Bills, Shaq Lawson. The Bills have done pretty decent on their first round picks in the last decade, so it wasn't particularly easy to choose who was the worst one. Shaq Lawson isn't a terrible player, but for the 19th overall pick in 2016, more was probably expected than what has been given. He played his first 4 seasons in Buffalo, peaking with 6.5 sacks in 2019. Then he left to play for Miami and the Jets for a year apiece, before returning to Buffalo over the last 2 years, putting up meager numbers, respectable, but again, nothing that a first-round pick would warrant. Is he going to be the guy who finally gets the Bills over the Patrick Mahomes hump? Yeah, I don't think so. Buffalo Bills, Sean McDermott. We all have the whole 9/11 memes about McDermott now, but the facts are is that in his 7 years as Buffalo head coach, they've won 64% of their games, but left a lot to be desired in the postseason. I thought that he might get fired after yet another early playoff exit last year against the Chiefs, but I think it's smart to hold on to him because, again, this was a team and a franchise that prior to to him getting there in 2017, hadn't made the playoffs in the 21st century. So it's all relative, but I think as long as they got Josh Allen and the Bills continue to trot out great defenses, that they will be in contention every year, and really that's all you can ask for. So I think that his hot seat ranking, though, is, I'm going to say a 2 out of 5, 2.5 out of 5, because at this point it's no longer can you prove you can win in the regular season, it's can you prove you can win in the playoffs, and just one conference championship game appearance in his career is not good enough. But again, success is relative. There are plenty other teams that would love to have the success the Bills have had over the last 4 or 5 years or so. Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen. We all know about the turnovers and everything like that, and in that sense, he's kind of like the new age Brett Favre, where he's exciting to watch because you never really know what to expect, but he's still going to produce 40 or 45 touchdowns every season, which is ultra rare and not easy to do. All things considered, he's probably the second best quarterback in the NFL right now, behind the guy in Kansas City. His playoff numbers for his career are really great, although I do believe that they are inflated a bit by his amazing, historically dominant 2-game run in 2021, which is really, I think, where most of his playoff reputation has come from when he lost to Kansas City because of his defense. Outside of 2021, his playoff numbers are okay, not great. He is now 0-3 against Mahomes in the postseason. Now, if you want to talk about ranking quarterbacks head-to-head record-wise, I understand, especially in football, it's not an exact science, but still, Allen appears destined to be playing the role of Vegeta to Mahomes' Goku. His prove-it rating, he's at a 4.5 out of 10 for me. Buffalo Bills, Von Miller. People might argue with this and say, well, everybody knows that Von Miller's washed, but I don't think a big enough deal was made out of the fact that Von Miller did not record a sack last season. 0 sacks, and I understand the year before he had his ACL injury, he came to Buffalo, but Von Miller, again, he's still a big name, and he had no sacks last season. He's one of those guys that he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's one of those great players that he's kind of washed up before people are ready to admit that he is, and he's washed up. Now, maybe he'll bounce back and have a double-digit sack season this year. I don't know, but he looks, to me, he still has a premier reputation despite the fact that he hasn't produced on the field at an elite level in about a year and a half. Buffalo Bills, Dan Darag. I think I said his name, but look at that fucking haircut, dude. What the hell is that shit? That's like Green Day, Billy Joe Armstrong from 2005, only this was in the late 60s. What a disgrace. Anyway, we look at Double D's stats here, and back then, obviously, teams played just 14 games up until the 1978 season, so Double D starting 7 games was just good enough for him to qualify based on my half of the team's starts qualifier, and by golly, am I happy that he qualified, because this would have been a shame to overlook such a terrible season. He completed just under 43% of his passes with 3 touchdowns and 14 interceptions for a 33 passer rating, and he averaged 4.3 yards per attempt. And safe to say, Buffalo Bills were complete dog shit that season. But hey, they would end up getting one of the top picks in the 1969 NFL draft, and they would use it on famous class act and woman respecter O.J. Simpson. So there's a silver lining in everything.